Clearly, it's going to be a very difficult one to follow. Thank you very much for setting a scene. There's going to be no thunder stolen here, certainly not from my side. But I've got some esteemed colleagues who I've worked with over a long period of time who certainly understand the local space, and we wanted to have a discussion really in thinking about the challenges that local means and brings as a very dynamic platform and a new dimension to existing business models, existing mechanisms of engagement. When I look at local from an investment point of view, from a business development point of view at Ariadne Capital, I think the biggest challenges that we face, I'm trying to understand that local is an additional dimension. It sits alongside what exists. But as Russ said right in the beginning, it's actually what we always do. We always go into a store at some point in time. We're always interacting in a local way. So what it does in a digital environment actually takes it out into new dimensions. And I think, as Russ said, they talk about the three who, where, and when, who, where, and what. At Google, what we look at Ariadne are the four dimensions of proximity, intention, time, and the convergence between online and offline, because local really brings that element in. What I'm keen to do with the panel this afternoon is to have a brief discussion about what really makes a difference from their perspectives, either helping companies engage in the local environment or how they themselves have used local as a means to deepen their engagement, to deepen their conversation, and what the real challenges and the hurdles have been. So introducing Hugh Chappell, who is a serial entrepreneur, built a couple of businesses, sold them off, and has now become a non-executive director and active angel investor in a couple of businesses, including Park at My House, My Voucher Code, so Code.uk, and a very exciting online dating site that you may have seen advertised all across the London tubes. Brad Lehman is the founder of Geocast. After having founded a previous business called Xbridge in the UK, he realized he wanted to build something that was hyper-local, that was hyper-engaging and massively scalable, and realized that the local space was one which large organizations, as well as small, didn't necessarily know how to grapple with, as LBS was rapidly growing as an opportunity. Brad has a lot of insight about dealing with local businesses and helping them access broader market share. And so Geocast was really brought together to found that. Peter Gandy, who is at Rockpool Digital, heading up what Rockpool's latest focus has been, is to really think around a 360-degree point of interaction with consumers. How do you get them to walk into your store? How do you know who they are? How do you get them to engage with you online and still continue that same conversation? And how do you bring local and mobile social into all three elements? So today's panel really have that long and sort of deep expertise in bridging, as we saw in the Foursquare sort of Evans slides, of local, mobile, and social. Bringing those three together becomes a really, really potent engagement mechanism. So I think, Hugh, if you don't mind starting with you, really in terms of local for you, clearly there's a definitional point, but what is the most important thing that businesses need to do when they think about local? Is it to think of it as a platform? Is it to think of it as a service? Where's the transformation point come to them?
Yeah, personally, I try to understand local from different angles. For the business I work with, sometimes local can be, I want to go somewhere, I want information from the area that I'm going to. Sometimes it can be actually the immediacy of I'm actually in that location and I want to get information available right around me. So I think the definition is a clear point and an important point to consider first.
Yeah, interesting question. For me, I think the urgency is not whether it's a channel, whether it's a platform. We're very good at having intellectual discussions. I think the importance is all about thinking about whether your customers want it. We saw with Bonan a great setup in the sense of the evolution that people have gone on with those growth curves. A lot of businesses now are in an issue where the consumer is already ahead. The way they discover information has changed enormously now, and they expect information wherever they are, whatever they're doing, whatever device they've got. So, is local relevant to your customers? I'd argue yes. But also location is, and local is just part of it. In the setup, we talked about the contextual piece as well. So I think really we need to start thinking about what the audiences want, how they want to communicate, and basically what messages people can give to them.
Should we just ask the audience quickly, how many people here represent intrinsically local businesses where physical footfall is fundamentally important to you, or where building a digital strategy is currently part of what it is that you're focusing on looking at? That's a fair few. Who in the audience feels completely daunted by what this additional dimension of local is? None at all. We can go home. Brad, I wanted just to ask you, you're working with your own brand, but you're also helping brands engage in a local context and building loyalty and building that sort of convergence online to offline, increasing footfall and the like. What are the common things that you notice businesses either get very right or very wrong? And what are the challenges to big business thinking local?
Big businesses we've worked with for a while now, first with my first company, Xbridge, better known online as Simply Business, and now it's Geocast. We have a few partnerships with big businesses, and where we help them is with a core cultural difference between a big business, which often seems to be about focused on mitigating risk, and a startup like us, which is involved with embracing risk and managing risk. So we take those risks on their behalf and help them manage those risks so that they don't have to, and so that their compliance officers don't have to worry at night about whether they're taking on too much IP risk and so forth. We take that on and help them build the channel.
Yeah, I think there's some, if I may, there's some huge challenges out there. I spend a lot of my time talking to brands. I'm probably getting 3 key areas of feedback for challenges that a lot of brands are thinking about when they're talking about this space. First off, it's really having what I would call the foundations in place. So forgetting all the sexy stuff that a lot of people put into the press, into the media, but having the fundamentals in place to enable them to think about doing all this innovative stuff. So from fundamentals and the foundations, what I'm specifically talking about there is a lot of people I talk to have a high street presence, for example, with a shop or a bank or whatever. They've established themselves with a web presence, with a website. Obviously, everybody's got that. But many of them still haven't really gone into mobile properly. Many think it's acceptable to have just a normal website, which doesn't render well on a mobile when people are out and about. And that's very frustrating for people if they're trying to access local information. It's got to be easy to use. It's got to be very quick. So I think the first challenge is getting the foundations in place. So extending online specifically over into mobile is a massive challenge. I think then that gives a secondary challenge when we talk about that, and they agree that that's an issue. It's, well, I understand web. We've been doing websites for years. I've got my own in-house web team. It's, how do we go into mobile? This is all new and exciting. Everyone's talking about it, but we don't have the in-house expertise. So I think there's a very big challenge as well for businesses of how they do that. And I think Brad's point of working with small companies, which can move quickly and bring that expertise is a very good way for them to do it. And then probably the third, probably the hardest challenge that I'm coming across, and it talks to digital health again. A lot of businesses I talk to have digital owned in many areas of the business. So it's ambiguous, it's difficult to get ownership, it's difficult to get clarity around budgets. And I think that's an enormous challenge that businesses find. You're starting to see these digital director roles coming in now. That's bringing a lot of clarity, a lot of guidance, and a lot of direction to the businesses, but some of those still don't have autonomy on budget. So I think there's an organisational challenge that a lot of businesses need to grapple with to enable them to, get out there and try this new technology.
But for local, for a lot of these initiatives, particularly with smartphones, our company is about driving footfall via smartphones, influencing customer behavior via smartphones. It's not the digital director that we find that we engage the most proactively with. Yeah. Where we are now is sort of like we were back in 2000, 2001 when I started my other business, where people came to us and said, oh, you're about the internet. You need to meet with our CTO. Actually, we want to meet with the head of marketing. We're in the similar stage now where we say we're about driving footfall locally for small businesses via Shopperazzi. And they say, oh, you need to meet with our digital director. And we go to the digital director, and the digital director has huge incentives to make her e-commerce site function well, or his m-commerce site. Shopperazzi is about driving business locally to my 500 locations around the country. I don't really want to do that. That's going to detract from my website or from my m-commerce site. So we're finding that disconnect there again. And mobile is really not so much about digital. It's about driving footfall. And it's an opportunity for big businesses who've missed the e-commerce revolution, and most of them, I think, in the UK did miss the e-commerce revolution and let other brands like Amazon, take business away from them, and to actually leap onto that and engage locally with customers and drive footfall, which is where most of their cost base is actually fixed, and where the most opportunity is, because a customer that walks into your store is much more likely to spend than an e-commerce customer that clicks on your website.
Yeah, I think this is quite an interesting debate because with the website, of course, we can drive people from all over the world to engage with us, but with local, the ability to actually connect with people that are actually in the location of the vicinity is particularly interesting. So, I mean, examples of in businesses that I work with, it was mentioned that I work with the leading voucher website in the UK, and one of the interesting things that we can do now is people can be standing in the street, they're thinking, well, let's go for a coffee, where should we go to? People can then make that decision based on, Starbucks, a buy one, get one free, for example, we'll go there. And the ability to actually change people's decisions. And I think if you take this potentially a step further, and we were discussing this earlier this morning, I'm particularly interested, I personally don't mind to give up more information about myself and the kind of products that I would like to buy and the kind of products I would not like to buy if I can get more compelling results sent to me. One of the things I hate is people trying to sell me things that I clearly just do not want. And one of the advantages of mobile is, let's take an example. For example, it could be my hobby could be fishing, for example. The ability to walk past a shop, having given up my information, the ability for someone to know that I'm standing outside their shop or I'm in the vicinity, and maybe to say, here's an offer, might be on a fishing reel, might be a high-end fishing reel, because that's the kind of fishing reel that I might want to buy. And the ability to ping me an offer there and then, I know personally that would affect my ability to buy in store. And then if the offer's not compelling, as I'm walking away and I'm maybe half a mile away, maybe they will ping me again with a better offer. It's almost a bit like a subscription in a magazine when it falls, that maybe a few weeks later I get another better deal. And we know as salespeople and as marketeers that we can change people's ability to buy. So I find that particular subject particularly fascinating.
But you're also involved in a business which has a specific physical location. It's one where you park at myhouse.com, you cannot park it, digitally. So, that really to me is the intersection of local when it really turns a digital business into a physical environment. Yeah. What's the role of location there, and how do you try and take local and make it different so that people can discover and use the Park at My House service?
Well, yeah, I mean, parking is quite fascinating because I would suggest that most people when they park their car, they probably do it exactly the same way as their parents and their grandparents did in looking for a space or a car park. So the ability, Park at My House provides parking at people's houses or in offices or away from commercial car parks, but the ability to find somewhere in proximity to where you are is obviously particularly compelling, and as this finds its way into the car as well in the future, it'll be more interesting. But maybe a more interesting one on location, I have an investment in a dating website, and lovestruck.com is the site, and we launched iPhone, Android, and mobile web about a year ago, and I'm quite fascinated by the large number of people now that are actually accessing our infrastructure of our mobile device. That's approaching almost 50% now, and here in London. But proximity, and this is an interesting conundrum, maybe not something that I might have done, but it'd be interesting to see what the audience think. Location-based, we're able now to allow people, we could be sat here chatting away, having a drink in the evening, and I could be having a look at who is around me, and I like her, and I can engage with her, and then very quickly, the possibility to say, look guys, enjoyed the beer, but I'm off out with somebody else now, goodbye. And that's an interesting, it's amusing, and it's interesting, and when I tell my generation of people, no, I wouldn't do that. But you know what? You bloody well would if you were single again. I know you would. It's fascinating how technology can provide you with a lot more options than perhaps we had in the past. So that's a good example of using location based on an old-fashioned application.
We just launched a feature on Shopperazzi. For those of you who know, Shopperazzi enables people to find what's on sale around them. So while it's great for large brands, as we have about 15,000 fashion retailers on it, it's even more useful for local retailers, some of whom don't have a website, don't have a Twitter feed, aren't on Facebook, et cetera. But what's interesting, we just released a service that allows people to set sale alerts, either for a store that they like or for a label that they like. So I can set an alert for Ralph Lauren, or I can Prada, or whatever it is. And I can set alerts so whenever it's on sale around where I live or around where I work, and I can choose several different locations, I'm alerted. And that's a hugely popular feature, even though it's only a few days old. We're just amazed by how successful, and how people want those, but it's local alerts. It's not some monolithic company they're dealing with that sends them a newsletter. It's a local alert. Here's a place near you, where you live, where you work, or I can buy this on sale. And that's what they find really interesting, and that's what they're engaging with.
I think alerts is potentially huge. I would put some caution around alerting, because we all know about spam, and spamming your customers just turns them off. There's a big issue. We talk about relevance. You'll hear relevance spoken all day, and engaging and relevance. It's the key buzzwords, but it's very central. Alert has value if it's relevant to what you're doing and what you're looking for.
So it comes back to what you were saying, giving that personal information away for them.
It does, and I get many alerts, largely through SMS, which are totally irrelevant to my life, and that just turns me off. A coffee is a great example. My wife came up to me the other day saying, "Why do I keep getting coffee vouchers? I've never drunk coffee in my life." So, that's a really bad experience. So what we need to do, and we're touching on data, Hugh talked about data a bit, Brad's talking about data from alerting, and it comes back to the question around challenges, is business needs to basically aggregate all of the data that it collects and all of the touch points it has with an individual, preferably to unify that so they learn as much as they can about an individual. And then with all of its messaging, whether that's through alerts, whether that's just content that is delivered on screen, try and make it as relevant to that person's life as possible. Because otherwise, the danger of getting it wrong is it's a very bad experience, and customers act with their feet. They're very happy to go to your competitors, and then you've got the cost of bringing them back in. So, let's not underestimate the importance of getting the data and the relevance right.
Relevance is hugely important. Some people in here who subscribe to priority moments in the room, and how many of you get spammed at least once a week with something that's irrelevant or you don't like? These are supposed to be local alerts, but what they haven't done a real good job is making that relevant to what's near you, to what's relevant for you. They haven't looked at what kind of coupons do you like, what's near you, is this offer actually available near you? Yeah. And that's hugely important, as you point out. When done well, alerts are hugely valuable service, but they have to be done in a very customer-centric way. You have to ask each time you send out an alert, if I was a customer, would I love this alert or would I hate this alert, or something in between? And if it's not something they love, you shouldn't do it.
And I think it keeps coming back to one of the points of, technology is enabling us to have this real-time conversation, to engage an audience irrespective of where we are, irrespective of the device or the touch points. But is it really about technology when we're sitting in business, either at board level or sort of digital team level, or we're sitting at marketing? What are the key things that we need to keep in mind when we're wanting to leverage local as an opportunity to strengthen our brand and to better understand our consumer?
I think a perfect example is how we collect data and what we do with that data, because if the data is managed correctly, it can be extremely compelling, but likewise if it's not. And also I think sometimes people need to think about, when engaging with the web or engaging via the web or mobile, maybe people's habits are slightly different, and also maybe even hours of the day people have to think about that, and nothing worse with being spammed, particular offers that just aren't relevant to the time frame as well. So for me, it's all about the collection of data, getting the right permission levels. And I think I don't mind people to tell me about amazing things that I want to do. I don't have a problem with that personally. But I do have a problem with things that I don't want.
I think one of the questions, it goes back to my point about what do your audience want, what do your consumers want. So, some great examples about driving people into retail units, but then, so that's the location bit done, you're nearby, you're in there. It's what you do with the customer then. So it's also the content strategy around it. I've had conversations with retailers, and I've suggested that we talked about scanning. Add in a price comparison solution for them, Sticky Bits, for example, where they can compare just by scanning the barcode. Great, you can price match, but that's adding value to your consumer once you've got them there. So local's important, but I'll keep coming back to the fact that it's just part of a solution, and that's the thing that people should be talking about, is what is the total proposition? Because as Hugh said, once you demonstrate value to a consumer, they will give you data and information. They'll happily share it.
So Peter, just quickly then, and on to Brad as well, so what services and benefits have you managed to unlock for large organizations when helping them think about leveraging local as an added dimension?
Okay, so I work for a digital agency, Rockpool Digital, and we're all about connecting brands with consumers in a meaningful way, so back to relevance again. Probably the easiest way to answer that is probably to talk through a recent deployment we did with BP, which we launched about 4 weeks ago. So that was a location-based offer service. It's available to be accessed through mobile or through the desktop. Enables customers to go on and search for relevant offers effectively, either by a location, so the nearest service station to them, or by an offer category. They then can download an offer code, and we're using it to do a bit of, we talked earlier on, Bonin talked earlier on, about people understanding and getting some experience in this market. So part of what we're doing is at the foundation level, so it's testing what communication, how do people like to be communicated with? So people get the opportunity there to download a PDF and print it out. I'm amazed that people still do that, but a lot do. They can take the offer code, they can email it to themselves to use later on, they can SMS it to themselves later on, or if they're in a service a station, they can just present it on their phone, and then they can redeem the voucher whilst they're in the shops. So, again, that goes back to the foundations. That was helping them to get into mobile because they didn't have a mobile proposition. And really what it's about is taking the data and doing two things with it. The data that we're taking is preferred communication type, so how do their customers want to be communicated with? But also, once they're getting these offers, what are they doing with them? What's the associated basket revenues they're buying when they buy this individual offer that they're doing? And we're creating a lot of profile data for two reasons. One, it enables the service to personalize messaging to the customers. So we know you like to be texted rather than emailed, so communicate through text channel. We know the sort of stuff you buy, so let's give you insight to strong offers in those categories. So the personalization route. But looking inward within the organization, there's a lot of value in that data. So we also do reporting dashboards for them, which enable them to work out, what's happening so they can make business decisions. And there's some interesting learning, which, we'll go public on after it's been up for more than a month. But it's informing and influencing how they want to communicate with their customers. And this, as I say, is a basic solution, which is all about putting foundations in place to underpin what they want to call a two-way dialogue with their customers. So those are the sorts of things that we're talking about.
Brad, you were doing something, one of the questions from the audience earlier was around helping FMCG brands get into the consumer space when generally they rely on local storefronts to do that. And this is something that you've been working on specifically.
We have a partnership that we haven't publicly announced, but with a U.S. company in the coupon redemption space. And we've got some technology that we patented that helps these FMCG brands track redemption at the local level, at the point of redemption, without having it integrated into the point of sale equipment. So that's been really helpful because we're able to track in real time where these coupons are being redeemed and what time they're being redeemed, and also information about that customer. what other things are they redeeming the coupons for? Do they not just like crisps, or do they like sodas? Do they like this, that, et cetera? But more about them, and that sort of information. The brands that we're working with, the issuers of the coupons, are finding that really, really useful, because they're getting the sorts of information that I can't get from paper-based coupons, and even from desktop internet coupons, which have to be printed. They don't know when those are redeemed, how those are redeemed, that sort of thing. So this is new information for them that they're finding quite useful.
So Hugh, we hear about Foursquare and how, hugely socially local that is, and how people are sharing where they are and the sort of locations. On the other element, you've got dating, which is pretty personal, and I guess, up there with betting. And then we have, the ideas of coupons and sort of local commerce being enabled by devices and technology and the information share that happens. That seems to be pretty one-to-one, business to consumer, and the social element has sort of yet to happen in this conversation, as opposed to what we were hearing on Foursquare. So, looking at businesses that are looking to the evolution of the next stages of where they go once they've started to build that trust around their brand and location, where do you see social coming into location in terms of a business context?
That's a difficult one. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on that question?
Well, is it something where people start to tweet that they're going on a date, that they've met somebody on Lovestruck? Is that what Lovestruck would ideally want to do? Badoo's doing that quite cleverly in sort of making social dating, Zoosk, for instance. Or is it about the fact that I've just found the best parking spot locally? You don't necessarily want to share that because other people start grabbing for it. So there's sometimes a challenge in terms of.
I think there are some things you want to share, and probably there are some things you don't. So. I think on dating, maybe going on a first date, I'm not so sure you necessarily want to broadcast that through various social means. So I think there's time and a place. I mean, of course, other services, absolutely. If you find something good or you experience something good, of course you want to share that. So I think it depends on the situation. I would say, yeah, really.
We see social media, David, generally being adopted most successfully by small companies, particularly in the retail space. Big companies have challenges because they tend to try to manage their social media strategies centrally, and that doesn't really work. You have people going on to find information about the Gap here, and you see information about Gap in the U.S., sales in the U.S., because that's what's driving their business, and that's what drives the bonuses of the people that are running their social media site. Where we're working really effectively is with small local retailers who are building relationships with their customers locally. So come on in, have a free drink tonight. Things are a little slow, so free glass of wine with your meal, that sort of thing. We're building a big followings on Twitter, Foursquare, whatever it is, but we're working locally, or where big companies have devolved responsibility to local store managers. It works really well. Where big companies are trying to manage social media from a central place globally for a local business, that doesn't work. For Pepsi, that may work because Pepsi is a global brand. But for retailers, it's the local businesses that the retailers or that the customers want to have a relationship with.
I think Evan had it bang on earlier on when he did the intersection of mobile, local, and social. I think social is enormous in this context of local. I think that's a great way for word of mouth. So if you've got any great offers, for example, we use the offer example, people are going to talk about them. They're going to post them on sites like My Voucher Codes. That's going to get a buzz. So social's huge. People like to talk to each other. It's a great way for you as businesses to watch what people are saying as well. We talk about two-way dialogue. It's listening as much as shouting at people and telling them or pushing stuff at them. So social has a huge, huge role, I think, in this going forward.
Particularly in a hyper-local context where you've got communities and people within that community are contributing, and I think in that context, in addition to what you've been saying, Brad, can be very powerful.
Well, thank you very much indeed.